Hello, good day, everyone. It's good to have all of you here, participants from different parts of the world, I believe, wherever you are joining us from. I'm very much excited as well to be with you on this all-important webinar today on a topic that, for me, is very dear and personal. I'm talking about mental health and well-being. Again, it's a pleasure to welcome you all, and we are very much excited here at Drive to Inspire Africa to host this particular event. And I must say, uh, this is as a result of the mandates that we have. And when I say we, I'm talking about Drive to Inspire Africa, the mandates that we have with respect to our core pillar, which is engaging the youth of Africa and, of course, global Africans. And by that, I mean every African African living in the diaspora, wherever they are. Our mandate is to inspire them, guide them for the generation, for the future. And mental health conversation, well-being is key, because how do we have a leader tomorrow who is well-sounded with their mind when that particular issue is of, is unattended to? So should there be a need for us to attend to it quicker if there's a problem is very vital. So I am very much excited that this particular topic is here. And I'm surprised that I was actually, chosen to lead this conversation today, because this topic, I would say that I see myself in it, so it is a space that I very much cherish and welcome every opportunity to be part of the conversation. Of course, I'm here today moderating it. My name is Barry Musa. I'm going to be moderating from now till the end of this particular webinar. And like I said, it's a core mandate, more of like a social responsibility for the organization Drive to Inspire Africa. We engage the youth every now and then. And how would you engage a youth when you know or unknowingly know that they have an unstable mindset, they have an unstable mental health, which means that whatever you're going to be speaking to them about, whatever you're going to be engaging them on, well, they're going to be listening, but at the end of the day, would they work with it? Would they have the confidence to work with it? So it is very much important that we touch on this particular issue. Now, as we all know, mental health is an essential part of our health, affecting how we think, how we feel, how we relate to others, and of course, how we handle everyday challenge. In today's fast-paced world, conversations about mental health have become very much important, and is one of the dominant conversations in our corporate spaces as well, because you can never be fit enough to execute your mandate, your responsibilities, without having that sound mental health. And of course, this webinar, I believe, and I know, aims to increase awareness, reduce stigma, and provide practical insights that can help us prioritize our mental well-being and support those around us as well. So we encourage active participants, guests, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are joining us, to chat with us through the message box, and of course, your questions and answers. Your questions would also be answered as we continue. And also, let me just make this quick note that this is educational, okay, and is not a substitute for professional or medical mental health care. It's educational, just to draw your attention to some of these matters and to give you the cue on picking up, symptoms. When you see it from within, or with a brother or a sister, you should be able to tell and know, the right, conversations to have with them. So if someone is in crisis or is at risk of harming themselves, we encourage them to contact local emergency or services, or a qualified mental health professional immediately. And of course, we are honored to have our distinguished speaker with us today, who will, of course, share their expertise, experiences, and recommendations on this all-important topic. Our speaker today is a clinical psychologist and lecturer with the University of Ghana Medical School and Accra College of Medicine. He's a member of the Ghana and American Psychological Associations and the National Secretary for the Ghana Psychological Association. He's an employee a wellness consultant and mental health advocate as well. He is in the person of Dr. Seth Mawusi Asafo. Doc, thank you very much for joining us. Once again, it's a pleasure to have you on this all-important topic, mental health and well-being.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to have this opportunity to, as it were, I keep telling people that every time I get the opportunity to talk about mental health, one, I'm breaking the stigma, but more importantly, I'm helping people to take a more preventive approach towards health. And that's
Right,
reducing the pressure on mental health professionals. So I'm
right,
excited to
right.
be here. Right.
Right, great. And just also reiterate this that we have participants currently from different parts of Africa and possibly other parts of the world outside the continent. And they would like to see our doctor, our speaker. So if you'd do me the honors by, okay, perfect. Wonderful. We can now have a view of doctor. So everybody can put a face to our guest speaker today. Again, welcome everyone, and we're still expecting more participants to join us. But let me just start by saying this, Doc. One
Yeah.
one, we seem to be in a global village where mental health conversation is critical, especially in corporate spaces, and in our tertiary institutions, even going down to our semi-tertiary institutions, our SHS, institutions and all of that. But majority of these matters take place within our, I wouldn't want to call it a literate community, but non-formal community. I've lived in a Zongo community. I've seen it. I've lived in a dominated community where you can pinpoint issues of such amongst our peers, amongst our elderly people. However, it's becoming a canker where you can't simply address it as that. When that happens, the person is the person should be looking to either be stationed at the asylum or looking for a traditional herbalist to handle issues, but negating the element of dialogue,
Mm,
having a professional conversation for someone who actually can read what's happening in your mind and tell you solutions.
mm,
Yeah, so for me, that is becoming more pressing because we have a chunk of our population in these spaces. Not everybody is in the corporate space. You can count the numbers, but in our lower parts of the community, that is a matter of concern, and that's where some of the fortunate ones get elevated to the corporate spaces. So, how do we deal with these individuals in these spaces, for starters?
mm. Well, I think that's why I would really commend Drive to Inspire for even organizing this. Um, as a professional, what I do realize is that the lack of information is probably why many people are ignorant about mental health. Now, there is this challenge where people tend to equate mental health to mental illness, but those are two very different concepts. In fact, if you look at physical health, there are days that you probably wake up you don't feel yourself 100%, but you're not sick. The same thing
Yeah,
happens with our mental health, that there are factors that consistently, hit at our mental health. And I always tell people that the power is in your hands because certain lifestyle behaviors or choices can either help your mental health go up or can make it decline. Now, when we
right,
talk about mental illness, that's when there's an actual defect. So it's different from mental health, which everybody has, but mental illness is more of a defect. And I always give this analogy of what a ladder looks like. Now, if you take a ladder, right, the base of the ladder is where I would normally say there is no illness. The absence of disease is the base of the ladder. Now, the moment you start to climb up the ladder, you're actually optimizing your health. So, for instance, when you're exercising, when you're eating well, when you're sleeping well, all those things enhance your health. So, it's not just about the absence of illness. And illness starts when
right,
you start to dig below the base of the ladder. So, that's a
right.
much more severe or significant concept. So, if you equate mental health to mental illness, the only thing you hear is madness, and that's typically what many
Mm,
people know. In
yeah,
fact, I
yeah,
tell I tell lots of people that in order for us to break the stigma, we must also show the different levels of professionals. that are able to help with mental health related issues. So most classically, you see psychiatrists, but the psychiatrist is one level of people that deal with mental health related issues. You have the
Right.
psychologist, you have the social worker, you have the counselors, you have even executive coaches. All these people work within the realm of mental health. So it might be easy for you to say, I'm going to see an executive coach or an advisor, but I'm not
Mm.
seeing a psychologist because then there's a stigma attached to it. But when we open
Right.
the niche, people embrace mental health a little differently than when they consider it as mental illness.
Right. Right. That's quite insightful. The partitioning you just did, the coach, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, and all that. So these are all areas or people station that you can visit. But how do you know who is the right person to visit to
Well,
see?
it doesn't really matter. The moment
Right.
you start noticing that there's something wrong,
Mm,
thankfully, if you look at the way our health systems work, if
mm,
you go to a lower tier health
mm,
facility and they're unable to deal with it, they are likely to
mm,
say, go to the next level. So it's
mm.
more about being aware that something is off. And once something is off,
Right.
so for example,
Mm,
in Ghana, one of the things that was done from a national governmental level to reduce the stigma was to
mm.
ensure that mental health was part of primary health care. So in any hospital
Right.
that you go, there is a mental health unit. And that
Mm,
definitely reduces the stigma because then now it's like, oh, you're going to a hospital and it offers one of those
mm.
specialties in
Right.
comparison to going to a fully fledged psychiatric hospital, which
Yeah.
is usually
Yeah.
where many people say,
Yeah.
oh, no, once you get there, you're not, you're cuckoo, and basically there's no turning
Mm,
back for you.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, it's
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Before Doc continue, let me take this message. It says, I am Pius Oecho Agada. Good evening, great minds. I am glad to be here. I am a mental health care volunteer with Rescue City Medical Center in Makodi, all the way in Benue State, Nigeria. Yes, so yeah, that's how far reach your participants are. So we keep encouraging you to also send your chats here, and we can read them. Doc, every day you hear people say, "I'm stressed." We seem to have overused the word stress. It's becoming a cliche where everybody is like, "I am stressed, Charlie. I'm stressed." Could that is for a professional like you would say, look, you need to look at it beyond the word stress, right or wrong?
Well, true. I mean, the interesting thing about stress is that stress has an evolutionary concept attached to it. So whenever we talk about stress, we are looking out for a number of factors. There's a demand.
Right.
So there's something that you need to accomplish. There's a task you need to do, like a test you need to write, a
Mm,
marriage you need to get into, become a parent, or even, put in the logistics to organize this amazing webinar. Okay,
yeah.
that demand is typically what you call a stress. So it's a component of it. Now, the
Mm,
interesting thing about stress is that many stresses we're able to cope with. And in a sense,
okay.
if you can cope with a stressor, it no longer
Mm,
becomes a stress because it's something you can deal with. And I have
you can cope.
an
Yeah.
old mentor who asked me a question, and he said, "Do you have challenges?" I said, "Yes, I do." He says, "Can you do anything about it?" I said, "Yes, I can." And he said, "So why worry?" And then I said, no, no, you know what? Let me change my response. He said, go ahead. So he asked me again, do you have challenges? I said, yes. He said, can you do something about it? I said, no. And then he said again, why worry? In essence, if you can't do anything about it, or if you can do something, I just do it and then that's it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
in stress, typically there's a perception that we're unable to deal with it, or our coping resources are not enough to deal with the problem, which means that the stress
Right.
therefore persists. Now, the
Right.
problem is that the body has a natural stress response. And what the stress response does for us is that it preps us to be able to meet our demands. That's what the
Right.
stress response does. It preps us to be
Right.
able to meet our demands. Now, the system was made to work for a very short period of time, and it
Right.
has a trigger of danger. So typically when someone experiences a stressor upstairs in the brain, the only explanation
Mm.
the brain has is danger. So it
Right.
doesn't matter if you have a broken heart from a broken relationship. The system
Mm.
triggers danger. It doesn't matter if you're anticipating too much rain and a flood or not being able to
Mm-hmm.
get home on time, still registers as danger. It doesn't matter if
Mm.
there's a gun pointed to your head, it still
Mm.
recognizes that as danger. Now, that
Mm.
system was made or architectured to help us deal with danger very quickly. So, for
Mm.
example, if you've ever been pursued by a wild creature like a dog, you might probably
Mm.
scale a wall and wonder, where did I get the energy to scale that wall?
To jump, yeah, yeah, true
You
that.
had that
Very
energy.
true.
That is the survival system kicking in. And it kicks in
Right.
quickly to allow you to escape and survive.
Mm.
Or if it can't do that, then you are devoured by whatever threat there is. Except that
Right.
in the modern world, our brains
Mm.
have been wired in a way that these triggers for danger can exist for months to years when the system was made for just to survive 5 minutes and just give you an edge to run away. So you can only
To run,
imagine
yeah.
what's happening in the background, and that puts a lot of the body's biological systems offline. So truthfully,
Mm.
excessive stress can actually make you physically ill. So when people say they're feeling stress, I think what they're
Yeah.
talking about is a sense of discomfort, a
Mm.
sense of being overwhelmed, and all those
Mm.
really make sense because the brain still explains it as danger.
Danger. It's quite interesting how you've thrown. If I'm supposed to print out a book, I'll probably do volume one, volume two, because it looks so simple as a word, but the varieties of angles that you've taken us through stress is quite interesting. So that particular, easy quick fix, or however did I fix this particular problem, was just a mechanism to work within a short period of time. However, some people have this lasting, as you said, for years.
Months to
Now
years.
that's troubling. That's troubling. So that now, are you saying that that translates into an illness?
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. I'll give you context. So typically, I know that many people in our science classes from maybe junior high school, senior high school, went through a process of what they call fight or flight response. Okay. Now,
Right.
in essence, our survival system is the fight or flight response. And the fight allows us, and it evolved from a very primitive perspective where in the past, life was all about danger. So, our ancestors essentially had to build resources to allow them to quickly either flee a danger or deal with the
Right.
danger. That's the way that this works. Now, in the
Right.
modern world, we're not dealing with the same amount of threat where you're fighting dinosaurs if they ever existed.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
fighting wild creatures because basically you lived with them. You
Mm.
were basically fighting to protect your territory because other people would invade it. So it was highly specialized to give you a boost, like a turbo boost,
Right.
to be able to deal
Right.
with challenges. Now, in the modern world, we don't have those kinds of stresses. However,
Mm.
relationship stress, financial
Mm.
challenges,
Yeah.
pressures surrounding our environment, etc., still activate that system. Now, it gets even more interesting to know that if you think danger, you actually feel danger.
Danger.
So you can basically imagine something going off balance, and it actually what happens. And I'll give you a scenario. For those of us that like to watch movies, you probably watch a movie like a horror movie, logically know that it's a movie, and then you're afraid also about what happens. You get scared
Happens. Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
know the monster is not coming out of the screen. In another light, you might probably watch a movie and cry at the end of the movie because your favorite actor died. But you
Yeah.
do know that it's not real, it's stage, it's a simulation of sorts. Now, the
Yeah.
same thing happens in the brain where whatever you picture, okay, becomes a reality. And when that reality kicks in, it activates the body's resources, regardless of whether there's a danger or not. So let me
Or
give
not.
you a few practical perspectives of how this works. Now, one of the first things that happens when your survival system is activated is that your heart starts to beat a bit more profoundly than usual, which could affect your cardiovascular health. That's one of them. Okay. Now,
Right.
the second thing is that the brain and the body start to prioritize resources because it perceives that you're in danger. So it says that we cannot be in danger and be thinking about certain things. For example, food. Feeding might not be a particularly adaptive thing to do when you're in danger. And that's why for a lot of people, when they're stressed, overwhelmed, they lose appetite. It's not just usual. It's part of the body's
Yeah.
way of saying, prioritize what matters the most. So you don't feel like eating because the body is saying food is not as important. And this is something that can lead to a lot of people having gastrointestinal issues where the acid essentially wears out the inner linings of the stomach and they start to
Mm.
have like acid reflux as one of those things. Now, when it comes to the immune system, because the body says we're in danger, the immune system reduces its power or its functioning because it says, why on earth should we be thinking about parasites and viruses when there's a gun to our head? So you may notice that when someone goes through a very stressful event, and sometimes as simple as for us students, when you have exams, you spend time, you study. Right after the exam, you have a common cold, you have malaria, you have a cough or something of that sort. And all of this simply occurs because the immune system, which is supposed to fight these things, becomes impaired. So then it's so easy for them to drive into you and then unsettle you. So you think about it
Right.
that way. Let me give you a very interesting thing about infertility. So there are people who struggle with infertility, and we've successfully managed it simply by managing their stress or their anxiety. And this is what
Mm.
happens. When your brain perceives you're in danger, there's a general reduction in the female hormones that are likely to make you fertile because the body says we can't be in danger and attempt to carry another offspring. So then the body does not even allow you to do what? To do that. Think about sexual performance in men. If you had a gun to your head, how easy would it be for you to have an arousal and to actually perform?
Right.
So
Right.
these are some of the
Right.
most interesting things that happen where physically you could
Mm.
get sick simply because you're going through a mental health related challenge or just a stressor for that matter.
Wow. That's quite insightful and interesting. And on this note, if we should continue, trust me, we wouldn't end today. However, I'm aware Doc has a presentation to share with us, and we would like to have that now. And for our participants, again, welcome and thank you very much for joining us on this all-important topic, mental health and well-being. If you have any question, you should leave it in the message box. We would definitely take them as and when we can, so Doc can respond to them. And we now wait for Doc's presentation on understanding mental health and well-being. Thank you.
The interesting thing is we have almost completed the presentation from all the discussions we had. But
Right.
nonetheless, let me just put this out for, some reference. So we're looking at understanding mental health and well-being. And I just wanted us to all do a quick check-in about the year so far. How are you feeling? Emotions are an integral part of mental health. So just look at this and tell me how you're feeling. You can just put it out in the chat box for us. Chances are you might have been oscillating between different feelings, which is quite usual, especially knowing that stresses are all around us and they have a way of taking our mental health from us, and we need to do things to resolve the balance. Now, when we talk about mental health, a lot of the times people think about that person on the street as unkempt, is dirty, has packed so many things around them. And that's largely where the stigma exists. But today I want to expand mental health for us to know that it moves away from just our thinking faculties being affected to our feelings and then our actions. Now, if you think about it from an emotional standpoint or from a feeling standpoint, being extremely angry, being shy all the time, worrying all the time, or being engulfed by anxiety all fall within the realms of mental health. Now, mental health also affects how we handle stress. So when you have challenges, what do you normally do? Do you perhaps actively face it or do you avoid it? So, for example, if you use alcohol to cope with your emotional related issues, that might be an avoidance coping mechanism, which is likely to impact both your mental and physical health. Now, we also look at how we relate to others as a key component of mental health, and then the choices that we make. Now, just to highlight this very quickly, in the modern world, a lot of people make large boasts about this whole year I've only slept 3 hours. And it seems as if not sleeping is a badge of honor, but it is a lifestyle choice and has many implications for both our physical and mental health. And so, if you're making a lifestyle choice of not sleeping or resting or consuming consistently alcohol, and using drugs, etc., these will all impact your physical health. So understand that our mental health is also intricately connected with our physical health. Now, to break the stigma, there are a few things we must notice, and there are myths that people have about mental health that aren't true. So, for example, one myth is that mental health struggles mean weakness. But the reality is that mental health challenges are a common human experience. If you lose a loved one, if you lose a relationship and you're crying, that doesn't make you weak. It's part of the natural process of getting back to a place where you can function. For example, when anything causes pain, you normally express it before you even know. So if you were walking and you stepped on a sharp object, you might probably say, ouch, or in my local language, Ajay, before you notice it. And that doesn't make you weak. It's a natural process. Another myth is that strong people handle everything alone. But you come to know that the existence of humans and our survival over the years have been based on connections. The connection that people made or being able to huddle together is what allows you to survive because, as they say, more effort from different people may actually help to give a survival advantage. Remember that seeking support is a sign of wisdom. You might probably have your own perspective and experience about life, but having somebody else's perspective and experiences gives you two of those, which is better than just the one. Now, talking about problems makes them worse, is what people say, but communication actually promotes healing. Now, there is a reason why people aren't able to keep secrets very much. Because when you tell someone a secret, it eats them up. And the moment they spill the beans, they actually feel a sense of calm. And that's part of one of the reasons why largely women outlive men. Because women speak, they express, men keep everything within them. Now, understand that mental health is not an absolute state. So it's not, as people say, you have it or you don't have it. But mental health is a continuum. So as I tried to explain earlier, think about mental health as a ladder. So things that you can do that allows you to climb further up and things that you can do that pushes your mental health to decline. So the power is really in your hands. It's within your reach to help your mental health thrive or to make sure that your mental health declines. And for us to understand well-being is holistic. It encompasses a healthy body and a healthy mind. Let me give you a practical example. A lot of the times people may consider the mind as operating separately from the body. However, if you're feeling particularly sad, one of the things that happens to you is that you may not have an appetite and you may not want to eat. Now, not eating keeps you within that state of sadness or that downward turn simply because the neurochemicals that gives us a positive mood are produced in the stomach and they need raw materials from the food that we consume to give us a sense of euphoria or happiness again. And so the body is connected to the mind, whether we like it or not. 90% of the chemicals that control human behavior, including walking, emotions, etc., are actually produced in your stomach. And that's why if you give your stomach good raw materials, you also have high quality neurotransmitters that impact the way that you function. Now, a lot of the times people ask the question, how do I know if my mental health is taking a hit? And there are many signs. Remember that having one of these signs every now and then does not actually mean that you have a mental health condition. For us professionals, we're looking for a combination of these signs in order to say that someone is struggling. We're also looking for the frequency and also the severity of these signs. So some of the loose hanging fruits of things that might help you know whether your mental health is struggling is that you may have periods of persistent sadness, and during these phases you're just less likely to be happy, and then you may start losing interest in things that previously you enjoyed. So maybe you like watching football, you might stop. You like hanging out with friends, no longer do you find that interesting, etc. Now, another thing might be mood swings, where when you're around people, and it's usually difficult for the person experiencing it to notice, but the people around them usually might notice this. They experience different emotions within a short period of time. So they might be really happy and they get angry and they get quiet and sad. And the people around them get confused. It's almost as if what is happening, and you start walking around eggshells because you are wary of, I might say something that might unsettle them. Now, in extreme situations, people experience delusions, and delusions are strongly held beliefs that people have. And even if you provide evidence to the contrary, it still doesn't make sense to them. Now, one of the more common delusions that people have is the delusions of paranoia. They have beliefs that people are working against them or people are plotting evil against them, even without evidence. And there are other delusions of sometimes someone feeling like they are this really big person, or very, someone who's pronounced in society, etc. You can have delusions of jealousy, where someone might have believed that their partner is cheating on them, even though they don't have any evidence. Now, fatigue is another classic sign of going through a mental health challenge. And this is because when you are going through a mental health challenge, sometimes anxiety can push you to overthink and worry. And the worry means that the brain works overtime and consumes more energy. Now, mind you, although the brain makes up just 2% of our total body volume, it consumes about 20% of the energy that's produced for the whole body. So that is really profound. And if you can imagine that you keep thinking all the time, you consume energy, you might start to feel tired almost all the time because your energy resources are depleted half the time. And there are people who start experiencing challenges with sleep. Either they're not able to sleep or they are sleeping a little too much. Now, some people also tend to worry about anything and everything. And these are sometimes without trigger, but they still worry. So you can worry from something as simple as dealing with traffic to work or to school, or that assignment that you need to submit, or a failure that is 3 months ahead of you. And you can just think about all the themes. Now, in extreme situations also, people experience hallucinations, where this usually affects their senses. So they're seeing things, hearing things, smelling things, or feeling things around their body that other people cannot perceive or cannot even experience. And these are normally indicative of more severe mental health decline. Now, there's also social withdrawal. And I tell people that this is the sweet spot where we help a lot of people. When you notice suddenly that a friend, a family member, a relation has suddenly started to withdraw and they're moving away from everybody else, be careful not to say that they're nauseous or conceited and they're looking for attention, so you let them go. Because typically when people withdraw, there's a bias that occurs in their mind. They are withdrawing, one, because they're saying they're betting on everybody else, nobody likes them, nobody cares about them, etc. Now, the moment we let them go, there's a confirmatory bias that says, aha, I was right. And that's what pushes people to feel lonely, helpless, and start to think, perhaps I may be better off dead than alive. And that puts suicidal ideations that may push some people to actually attempt a suicide and sometimes even succeed. And then you have changes in weight and also appetite. So a lot of the times when people's mental health are declining, most people lose appetite, but at the same time, a lot of people start to use food as a coping. Now, when you eat, the body releases a natural feel-good chemical called dopamine, and it's supposed to remind you to eat again. And this is simply for survival. Now, when people are feeling particularly down, overwhelmed, anxious, and they find a respite, which is that when they eat, it gives them a temporal calm. They start to eat simply for the calm and not because they are hungry, and that is a problem. And upstairs in the brain, it becomes very difficult for you to make decisions. You have difficulty concentrating because half the time your mind is roaming. And so these can be a few signs. And then comes to issue of self-care. So you may start to notice that somebody who used to be well-groomed no longer is doing that. And those things may tell you that someone's mental health is taking a hit. Now, in the modern world, there are some very interesting dimensions to mental health that affect the youth, and I think it's worth mentioning. And one of them has to do with the barriers to care, which is that most of the time, many young or youth concerns seem to be trivialized as attention seeking, or you don't have any challenges. Why are you saying that you're stressed, etc.? So many people's mental health declines further simply because they have barriers to care. And a lot of the times also, perhaps when it comes to getting care, someone needs to pay for it, and the person does not believe that you're actually going through a problem. Now, academic pressures are real. And if you think about it, in a world where achievement seems to be the top of everything that we require, many parents are hyper-focused. Many parents, many educationists and leaders are hyper-focused on perform, 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 to the extent that we sometimes even neglect social interactions, play, etc. And kids become hyper-focused on just the grades, so the academic pressures are high and high. Then the impact of social media. The information age has brought so many things so close to all of us. And the problem with it is that most of the time, what you see on social media is somebody's most filtered moments. What you do not recognize is that that person has downs also. They have days where they're not happy. They have days where they cry. But all they show are filtered moments of excitement and joy and affluence. And we aspire for that. We do comparisons to the point where we actually do feel that perhaps we have no value. And identity is such a key construct when it comes to youth mental health. If you don't form an identity where you believe in yourself, where you believe that you have self-efficacy, that you are worth it, it becomes a huge challenge. And we do notice that the same issue that permeates from social media impact is the use of technology as a solution. Now, how do many young people today deal with mental health issues? Yes, they go to their phones, or they watch a movie, or they play a game. And all they're doing is they are temporarily forgetting the problem, and they're using something to mask or cope. It's just like drinking alcohol to mask your pain. The challenge, however, here is that the problem will still exist even when you're out. So then the use of the technology in itself pushes people to get addicted. And one of the biggest addictions we're facing in Africa today is sports betting, especially in the underage population, gaming as well, pornography, etc. And all these things are impacting mental health a little negatively. Now, I want us to first talk about stress. And I want us to understand that. So we were mentioning the fact that what at all does stress do to us? Now, stress in itself is a good thing if it's short, and it doesn't have to be chronic, or it does not stay for a long period of time. So think about positive stress in this light. When you have an exam to write, a project to hand in, a report to make, a deadline to meet, there is an energy that you get that keeps you awake and alert to achieve this. And this kind of stress allows us to achieve. It helps, it's goal oriented. But at the same time, when you have stress that is so consistent and never goes away, it becomes detrimental to us because it overactivates that survival system that I spoke about. And each time you experience stress beyond the usual, stress or stress that you cannot manage will push itself into burnout. Now, notice that people may have what you call a biological predisposition to have a mental health crisis, but if they manage their stresses adequately, they usually will be fine through their lives. Now, let me put this in focus. We all may know somebody who was doing relatively well until they experienced a significant stressor or a trigger that pushed them into a mental health related challenge. Like they failed an exam, they lost a relationship, they were rejected by their peers. And that was so debilitating to them that it pushed their coping resources out of bounds, and then they started to suffer a mental health crisis. Now, with that said, it's important to notice the difference between stress and burnout. When stress is unmanaged, people experience burnout. And if you want to understand burnout, light a matchstick and watch it burn out. Notice that the stick still exists but can't do much. Now, in stress, people would normally react by doing more. It brings a sense of urgency, but in burnout, the disengagement, the energy doesn't exist. Stress affects us physically, but burnout usually affects our emotions. So that makes us cynical and indifferent about the things that happen around us. In stress, people experience emotional reactivity, but in burnout, our emotions become a little more blunt. In stress, it leads to putting in effort, but in burnout, it's motivation that is drained. So notice the difference. In stress, you put in a lot of action. In burnout, you have no energy because you have depleted all your energy resources. Now, how do I know that I'm going through stress? Typically, stress would affect us in four domains: emotionally in our feelings, cognitively in our thoughts, physically in our body, and then behaviorally in our actions. And I explained this a little earlier when I talked about the physical, that when you experience excessive stress, you could actually get physically sick. And especially in cultures that have a high reliance on religion, they might sometimes see this as a spiritual attack when in actual sense it's just excessive stress. Now, emotionally, when people are going through a lot of stress, they may experience a lot of anxiety, but most of them are also on the edge. The least thing, they get upset because they're already irritable. Cognitively, it's difficult for us to make decisions or to think well. Now, it turns out that when you're experiencing stress, your forehead, or what we call your prefrontal cortex, that you require to make logical decisions, analyze things, and come to conclusions and plan, seems to go off a little bit. So there's a small device at the back of your head we call the amygdala, which is primed in fear. Now, what the amygdala does is that it makes you react before you think. So maybe remember a time where maybe you walked in a dark alley or you were walking in the bush. You felt something go over your feet. In your mind, that was a snake. So you jumped back very quickly. And then you later looked down and realized that, oh no, it was just your shoelace. And those are some of the things that happens when you are very stressed, that you become more impulsive. And so the decisions that you make tend to have more challenges behind them. At the same time, behaviorally, these are things that we do to kind of offset the balance of the feeling down or feeling worried or overwhelmed. And behaviorally, you may notice that people may start engaging with drugs and alcohol or excessive social media use, excessive gaming, essentially anything that allows them to avoid the situation that they're thinking about. So to sum all this thing up, I tried to explain this earlier. Now, the human brain is still primitive in nature, so we call it the caveman brain. And our brains are still wired much like our Stone Age ancestors. So whilst we live in modern cities which are free from tigers and bears and things like that, our job stress, relationship problems, our assignment deadlines, achievement tests, etc., keeps our survival system consistently active, which then means that our stress response can be active for months to years, even though it was made to act very quickly. Now, in the modern world, we're noticing a sharp increase in diagnosis of anxiety and depression, especially in the youth population. And one of the concepts that's really important for mental health is resilience. Now, resilience is your ability to bounce back after adversity, or is your ability to advance even when you're experiencing challenges. Now, resilience is like a muscle. So you build the muscle by working it without facing challenges, without going through troubles. you cannot build resilience. So in the modern world where many people avoid having to deal with difficult things like actually studying for an exam, sitting down to prepare for a test or write an essay, we'd rather just use an AI to do it, etc. What we're doing is that we are gradually causing that muscle to shrink. And so resilience, which is when we face challenges, we'll struggle even more. So many of the children we face today have parents and guardians that essentially try to solve their problems for them. So the child never actually builds the muscle of resilience or builds problem solving. And so whenever they meet a little problem, what they do is they throw their hands up. Oh my God, I can't do this again. They might try to avoid it, or they might just crumble and stagnate at that point. So resilience only comes from having to deal with challenges. Now, I tell the story about what happened to me when I first experienced my first broken relationship. It was really painful. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do a whole lot of things. But the second one, well, I couldn't sleep, but I was eating well. Now I suppose I have so much resilience that if I had to deal with a broken relationship, at the back of my mind is knowing that the pain gets better at a point, and the experience would make it less likely for me to feel that intense pain that I felt in the beginning. And that's what resilience is. If I hadn't gone through the challenges, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Now, in the modern world, majority of the things that push our mental health to their limits is the perspectives that we take. Now, remember that the brain has an ability. It can create in great detail everything you think about. And if you think about it for good, you experience a resultant positive emotion. If you think about it for bad, you experience a resultant negative emotion. Now, every time something happens in your life, automatically, from a place of survival, your brain will think about the worst case scenario, although that's not what usually happens. Now, each time you think about the worst case scenario, you will feel the emotions of the worst case scenario. And just drawing back to the analogy I created about watching movies, if you watch comedy, you actually do laugh because you can relate. If you watch an emotional movie, you might cry because someone passed on, even though you logically know that it's not real. And perspective seems to be the hallmark of how we manage or deal with many of our mental health crises. And I tell the story about how when I drive and people cut me off or overtake me, it makes me feel like, they think they can drive better than me or their car is faster. So most of the time, what I'll do is to cut them off again and, attempt to show that I'm also. But the perspective I have there is one that's negative, that they think they're better. They think they're in a hurry. They think their car is better. Now, one day I was driving back from work and my tummy was rumbling. I needed to get home or else I'd soil myself. And when I finally had arrived home and I was in chambers, it dawned on me, well, what about all the other times where someone cut you off? Was it possible that they were struggling the same way? And now when I drive and someone does that to me, all I say is, oh, they're probably struggling. Now, notice that the situation hasn't changed, but the perspective that I'm bringing in changes a lot. So when perhaps someone rejects you or says, you cannot be my friend, or someone blocks you off, instead of thinking my world has ended, think about it like a boundary that's been set. And that reduces the tendency of what you actually do feel. Now, what are the few things that we can do to enhance our mental health? And earlier I mentioned that the power is in our hands. The things that we do or the things that we can do to help our mental health go up are really things that are within our control. So let me start with exercising. Now, earlier when I mentioned the fight or flight, I tried to say that physically you can get sick by excessive stress. And I want to throw more light on that. So when your heart starts to beat because, you have to meet a certain demand, whether it's dangerous, real, or imagined, one of the first things that the body does is to push the heart to start beating. Now, the heart beats very quickly to pump blood into your major muscles, to firm them up to allow you to stand and fight or to run away. Now, the problem is that if you were actually faced with a threat which was real, then you would need that blood. But in the modern world, many of the things that push our heart to pump blood to prepare us for danger are imagined. So that blood stays in your body and causes muscle tension. So one of the quickest ways to relieve that is to exercise. Because if you were in an actual threat where you needed to run or fight, you would have used up that energy. So if you experience a lot of pain in your lower back, your neck, and then your shoulders, those are signs of stress related pain. So that's one thing that exercise does for you. Another thing that exercise is capable of doing is because you do a lot, especially aerobic exercise, allows for oxygen-rich blood to get to the brain. And oxygen is fuel for the brain so that the brain is able to process much better, be more creative, and solve problems. The third thing is when you exercise, after each bout of exercise, the body releases a number of feel-good chemicals. And one of them is the same molecule for motivation. So the molecule for movement, which is dopamine, is also the molecule for motivation. And we notice that when people do exercise, especially in the morning, the motivation or the release of that reward, which is motivation, transcends other aspects of their life. And then the final thing is when you're exercising, typically you are focused on what you're doing and your brain is not wandering, thinking about all the things that would possibly happen. So for instance, you have a broken relationship, and then when you're sitting idle, you are thinking your partner or the person who you were with is with another person. They're enjoying, etc. That's painful. Now, when you're working out or you're exercising or you're taking a walk, you're usually not processing that. So temporarily, you allow yourself some respite. Relaxation also falls within the remit of what we call mindfulness. Now, because I mentioned earlier that many of the problems we face in the modern world that related to stress and mental health are things that we think about. Mindfulness allows us that time where we think about only what we want to think. Now, mindfulness usually is preceded by a form of relaxation. We use these things together. So when you're doing relaxation, you can do simple breathing. The breathing techniques calm the heart, number one. They calm the lungs, number two, and they send a message to the brain that says, false alarm, there's nothing wrong with us. So think about it this way. Every time you find time to relax, you're sending messages and signals to the body that says, we're not in actual danger. So when you're thinking about challenges and the body starts to react, mindfulness, which could be simply listening to music and then focusing on the rhythm of the music. Sometimes what I tell people is I tend to count cars when I'm driving. So when I'm driving and I have a whole hour before I get home and I find that my mind is thinking about all the challenges of the day, all the things I need to do, I start asking myself, how many cars are red? And I count them on my journey home. Because I'm hyper focused on that, my brain isn't thinking about any of those things that activates my survival system. So that relaxation and mindfulness can be powerful. Spending time outdoors allows for your brain to pick on new information. That also prevents it from thinking about the usual things that you think about. So it's always good to change locations every now and then to allow your brain pick up new stimulation. Now, when it comes to diet, I explained earlier that many of the neurochemicals that help us to function are produced in the stomach. Now, think about energy sources. Today, we're thinking about cleaner sources of energy. So, we used to have petrol, diesel, now we have electricity, hydro, nuclear, etc. Now, remember that every source of fuel does its job regardless, except the byproducts are problematic. So, when it comes to diet, if you want your brain to produce high quality neurotransmitters, you want to give it high quality raw materials. And these are typically fruits, nuts, vegetables, and proteins that are rich in omega-3, which are usually fish products. Now, with sleep, we notice that technology is stealing one of the most important things away from us, which is sleep. And it does this by impacting what we call your selective attention. Now, for your information, the optimum amount of hours that you need to sleep is usually 7 to 9. And we know that many people are sleeping less and less because they are consistently engulfed by something else. Now, if you notice that you struggle to sleep, there are a few things that can help you sleep a little better. Number one is temperature, and that's why when it's cold, you may feel sleepy more quickly than usual. And so keep the temperature low. Number two is sleep in absolute darkness. The body's natural sleep hormone, which is melatonin, is produced in absolute darkness. Now, it's also good to be physically active during the day because the brain tends to explain day in terms of light and activity, and night in terms of darkness and inactivity. At the same time, the body needs to absorb light during the day to help in the production of melatonin later in the night. So expose yourself to bright light as much as possible. Now, if you're one of those people, you realize that right before you go to bed, your brain starts buzzing with the things you should have done or the things you should do. Keep a journal by your bed and then write those things down. Now, the reason excuse me. Now, the reason your brain keeps buzzing with these ideas is it understands that when you sleep, you're likely to forget. So to prevent you from forgetting, it starts to, as it were, rehearse. And the rehearsal that it does is by reminding you of all the things that you need to do the next day in that order. So that's one of the reasons why you struggle to sleep. Now, it's good also to stay off your device at least 90 minutes before bed. We call it a no tech 90. And it turns out that the light that your phone screens and computers normally emit to the brain sends a signal that says it is daytime. Now, if you're one of those people that wakes up at night and takes out your phone to check the time, you may notice that once you do that, it's difficult for you to go to bed. And that's because the brain understands that it's daytime, so it's time to wake up. The next thing is, if you look at the time in the night to know when the morning comes, you're likely to start calculating how long before the morning and you cannot sleep. So if you want to sleep, these are things you should look at. Now, gratitude is also one of those amazing things that helps you feel grounded. And gratitude answers the question, regardless of all the challenges I'm going through currently, what is one thing I'm happy about? What's one thing I'm proud about? What's one thing I'm grateful for? The moment you start counting your blessings, your brain moves away from the future, comes to the present of what's tangible, and regulates your body. Now, routines are also important, and I want to emphasize a lot about how we manage our time. Most people from research attempt to do things at the last minute. And that means that the pressure we feel from the stress of having to complete is always high. It's always important to manage our time appropriately. And by managing our time, what you must realize is the best way to manage time is doing things in the present that affords you a lot of time in the future. So, for example, when COVID struck its head, one of the things that I suppose I did, which was really helpful, is I recorded most of my lectures, especially I'm a lecturer, and years after COVID, I still have these lectures, and sometimes I can actually buy time by giving out the lectures to my students and then sit back and write a grant or conduct a research. So remember that routines give us a sense of structure, but within routines, it's time management. Now, time management also helps us to integrate many different activities. If you keep doing the same things over and over again, it becomes boring. However, if you integrate and have time for many different things, you're always feeling stimulated. Then comes the issue of socializing. Now, when you socialize or when you connect with people, one thing you're doing is you are sharing some of the load. So human beings are hardwired to connect. Research tells us that when you connect with people, the body releases oxytocin. And oxytocin, for your information, is what we call the happy hormone or the love hormone. So it allows for us to bond. Mind you, oxytocin is also the reason why when perhaps you fall in love in the beginning, you never notice any flaws about your partner until after some time. So just imagine that you have a top up of oxytocin every single day. Now, socializing and connecting with people allows us, one, to vent and share our pain. Number two, it allows for solutions. Why? When you share your pain, people may tell you that, oh, when I went through a similar thing, I did this or I did that. The third one is it gives a sense of belonging. When you're going through a challenge and you believe you're the only one going through the challenge, you're less likely to feel it more profoundly. Once you feel other people have been through it before, you get a sense of calm. And also be careful about maladaptive coping resources. Attempt to feel the pain so that you overcome it rather than avoid it by using drugs and alcohol. And in the morning, well, technology, especially pornography, gambling, mindless social media surfing, etc. When all these things aren't working, get help. Getting help is talking to a trusted adult, a trusted colleague, a trusted parent, or somebody to give you a different perspective from what you are feeling. It's important to know when to seek help. So I mentioned earlier that the symptoms of mental health challenges we experience every now and then, but professional help may be needed when you notice that these symptoms persist for weeks. So you're not sleeping, you have lost appetite, you are sad all the time, you've lost interest, it persists all the time. When you notice that your daily functioning is affected, so in terms of waking up, or how you relate with people in school, at work, at church, or in interpersonal relationships. When you start noticing that your relationships with people are suffering, everybody's moving away from you or you're moving away from everyone, that might be a sign. And then when you start to have a repeated need to harm yourself, to cut yourself, or you have ideas that you're better off dead than alive, or that you notice that you're started to use substances or you're engaging in a behavior, i.e. gambling, consistently and it's becoming detrimental. Now, it's important that we all do know that seeking help has been stigmatized for a very long time, but we can support ourselves and the youth by doing a few things. Listen actively, listen without judgment. And there was a time where there was this thing that was going on around social media. We listen, we don't judge. So listen actively. Be interested in what someone tells you, your child, your colleague, whatsoever. Validate their feelings. Now, we have a culture that makes a lot of comparisons. And so when someone comes and then they say, oh, I'm going through this challenge, we're quick to say, oh, just that I have been through it several times already. Once you invalidate someone's feelings, they are less likely to seek help ever again. Encourage an avenue for openness so that people can come and talk about what's going on. Also, notice little changes. Pay attention to people around you. When people are struggling, you start to notice changes and then provide guidance. Now, in providing guidance, be careful not to force people. Most of the time, we try our best, but we can be very invasive. We notice someone's going through a challenge and we want to take on a mother or father role. You must do it. No, it doesn't work that way. You can provide guidance by simply telling the person, I see you're going through a challenge. I don't know what it is, but if you ever need to talk, if you ever want help, please come and speak to me. Sometimes it can be as subtle as sharing a social media posts on what you're noticing, maybe a mental health decline. That's also guidance. Avoid dismissing people's emotions and stop saying you are not feeling it, you are just looking for attention. Please do not make comparisons and also avoid using shame as a motivation. I notice within our culture, a lot of people motivate from the back. So I've seen several instances where a child would present their schoolwork, say they scored maybe 85 over 100. And the parents or the adult or the teacher might say, why 85? You should have gotten 100. Well, the right way to do it is to say, okay, you made 85 this time. Now let's move for 100. That's still motivating. But if you use shame and you make the person feel like they didn't put in any effort, at some point they will stop putting in the effort. So that's important. Now, as I bring this to a conclusion, I want us all to have a mental health action plan. So I want you to keep a notepad or make notes of things that you want to do for your mental health. Now, the first thing would be, how do I recognize my warning signs, or what are my warning signs? Number two is identify your support people or the people you can go to when your mental health is struggling. And then what are the practices that you are going to use going forward as healthy coping strategies? Exercise is one of those amazing things. sharing your pain with others, journaling are always helpful. Remember to ask for help when you need it. And thankfully, the modern world is embracing counselors, psychologists, therapists across board, and even chaplains. And these are people that you can see. And finally, also recognize that when you help others thrive, you feel their energy. So you support the other people who are struggling. And by supporting, I'm not asking you to go and put yourself fully engulfed, but supporting someone can be pointing them to a place where they can get help. I hope these are helpful for all of us. And we've all made notes of what we will do going forward to enhance our mental health. Thank you all very much. And it's been nice interacting with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. For a second, I thought I was in a class. I I couldn't help but start looking for my notes and seeing what I can revise for my next quiz or exam. But that was quite insightful. I said earlier that it's an educational session, not a mental health or a clinical consultation where they're going to take you through private, undisclosed sessions and all of that. So this, as I said, is as Doc has presented it through his presentation. Very much, you've practically covered, if I must say, most spaces when it comes to these important areas of mental health and well-being. I have a lot of messages in the chat box that I'll be taking, but before I do that, let me quickly talk about this particular one that is quite interesting, that is quite pertinent to me. Time, you made mention. This is a case where you have a job that is so demanding, but you need to figure out that time for yourself. The job is equally demanding. You love your job, but it doesn't give you the space. You're always on the move with that particular job. What is the way out of this particular instance, Doc?
Well, I mean, I wish there were a formula of something I could just, spew out there for people to do. But
Right.
whenever it comes to time and well-being, we talk about prioritizing. And
Mm,
prioritizing looks at what is most important in the immediate. Now,
mm,
there is I've forgotten the name of the author, and basically he talks about the matrices of time. Now, it
mm.
turns out that we all spend majority of our time being reactive. So, we're consistently just
Right.
something's happening, then you put out the fire, you put out the fire, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
problem with that is you're never building anything that allows for you in the future to relax. So, like
Right.
in many
Right.
business circles, they'd say, build a business that does not
Mm,
require you, but still makes money. And it's the same principle
right.
of time that invest in things today that allows you
Mm,
to have more time because time in
right.
itself is a commodity of it's a very scarce commodity that does not exist. And in
Mm,
terms of health, if you
mm,
overindulge at some
mm,
point,
mm,
the time will overwhelm you. And
mm,
if you're not taking breaks, if you're not making time for yourself, time will
mm.
ensure that you do it for yourselves, but at a more expensive rate. So you might get ill.
Right.
You might
Mm,
get ill and you might have no control over it. You might miss so many other things simply because of that. So the most
true.
important thing is looking at what is a priority now. Now, I have what I call priority to-do list every day, and I have three categories: high priority, mid priority, and low priority. Now,
Mm,
I have a rule that says if I'm able to accomplish 10 low priority, it's equivalent to one high priority. So it depends on where I
okay.
start, but I ensure that within a week, I'm able to cover at least three high priorities, two
Mm,
mid-level priorities, and another two low priorities. A sense
yeah.
of you are doing something. When you are reactive, most of the time you
Mm,
have nothing tangible to show that you are making
yeah.
progress. You're just putting out fires, and that really isn't helpful.
Interesting. Priority setting and knowing which one matters the most and not being reactive at all times. That's quite a nugget right there. Let's also move away from industry workers and get closer to the area of academia. Now, majority of our key audiences are the youth. I mean, we tour, go on our outreach programs at various SHS in Ghana and what have you. And a lot of them would get access to watch this video. A lot of them complain about pressure on campus. And recently, the Minister of Education talked about how the BEC students, they need time to write these papers. They need some amount of resting in between. And if you take it a bit higher to the tertiary institutions, I watched this video of the law students yet to be called to the bar. Some are sleeping in libraries, others are yawning, dozing. This is pressure. And this automatically from the presentation you've just presented has an effect on these individuals. Generally, pressure that our lecturers, teachers seem to be, oh, I'm giving you the task. It's much tougher out there, but deal with it here. How do we get out of this? Or what's the
You
solution?
see, the interesting thing is that the human brain is a highly adaptable organ. And when I say that, what I mean is it's able to deal with pressure. In fact, if you're consistently in a high pressured environment, you adapt to that environment. That's one of the things that
Right.
you must know. However,
Okay.
it's important to take breaks in between the pressures. Now, let me give a quick analogy. If I ask you to hold that mug that you have there and lift it up, okay? You might lift it up for maybe an hour and the weight might be too much and you may drop it
Yeah.
because you can't do it anymore. However,
True.
if you lift it up and then you start to feel tired, you put it down for a minute and you lift it up again and you put it
Yeah.
down again. You have a cumulative effect where you have a longer duration of being able to hold it. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
with pressure, you
Mm-hmm.
always need rest, except that many of us aren't actually
Mm.
resting. So the pressure comes, and the next thing
Yeah.
is instead of the rest, where partying is good, but partying all night is a problem.
Yeah.
Hanging out with friends consistently is a problem. So what you're doing
Yeah.
is you're stealing time, and that in itself also becomes stressful. Like I said, when you're not
Mm.
resting and sleeping, it's a lifestyle choice that can impact you. So the
Mm.
pressure in short bouts is really good for the brain. It helps it to build resilience. It allows
Right.
it to let me put the analogy of working out. If you go to the gym and then you work out, your muscles wear out. You rest it,
Yeah.
you can come back and do it again. But if you keep doing it and your muscles are wearing out, at some point the pain may be too much for you to keep doing what you're doing. So they always
Yeah.
ask for rest for recovery. So the pressure is real. But when you prioritize, when you also avoid perfectionism, that's another thing. So
Mm.
many of the student population are perfectionists in nature. I must get 100. Now,
Yeah.
something interesting happens each time you aim at a target that your brain perceives as beyond reach. The brain now spends more time thinking about, can I achieve it, than actually doing what it takes to achieve it. So
Right.
I'm going to write an exam and I say to myself, A is 80. Okay. Now, what I've automatically done is I've told my brain, you can make 20 errors. It's not a big deal. So my brain then
Mm.
now says, oh, that's really feasible. So let me make a funny religious analogy. When people are fasting and praying, right? One thing they
Mm.
do more than fast and pray is to look at the time.
Oh yeah.
And you
True.
know why? You know why they look at the time? Because their brain says, wow, I'm going to go 12 hours without eating. However, there are days where they go the 12 hours without even noticing they haven't eaten. It's because it's
Yeah.
not in their active awareness. And the brain does not perceive 12 hours to be a long time. So when I used to develop like timetables for people to study, I'd normally say 30 minutes of study, 2 hours of play. And the parents said, are you serious? I said, don't worry, it's a trick. Now, everybody's mind will say, oh, 30 minutes of study is a short time. I can actually do that. I can put away
Yeah.
my devices and study for just 30 minutes. But once you
Yeah.
get in the zone of studying,
Yeah.
okay, you might do an hour and not even recognize it. That's the difference. So
True.
it's the starting that matters the most. And that's an
Mm.
important
Mm.
thing. Okay.
It's quite interesting you mentioned fasting. For the Muslim communities, for instance, you fast for 30 days. Uh, The 31st day or the 32nd day, you find people still in the mode of fasting. Forget it.
Absolutely.
You start remember, I forgot what the Ramadan is over, and
Yeah.
because the brain has gotten used to that period and
It's
the way it
adapted to it.
operates.
Absolutely.
It just cements the saying that you are what you think about.
You are what you think about. I
You
agree.
get me? So yeah, so it's just amazing and wonderful. This creature called the brain operates. One would say you cannot finish understanding it. It just keeps, going on and on in its own direction, but however, very much interconnected with our biological makeup. Quite an
Absolutely.
interesting one. Let me also quickly take some comments in the chat box. It says here, anonymous attendee says, thank you so much, Dr. Seth, for your education. You clearly stated that mental health is different from madness. In quote unquote. So when someone loses interest in things that they do, their day-to-day activities like singing, reading books, talking to people, and other things like that, and from that, the person doesn't want to socialize with anyone. Always feels sad, cry all the time, feels stressed, and as a result, forgets things easily. It is a mental health. Is it a mental health or a part of madness? Also, what should the person do? Go to the hospital or seek counseling? Thank you.
Well, in terms of solution, going to the hospital or seeking counseling, I call are one and the same thing. So you go
Right.
to a health facility, describe what you're feeling, and let the professional say, oh, it's for you to see this person or that person. That might be it. Yeah, that's the way I want to put this. I don't want it to seem as if there is one way you must see this person, on the other you might see that person. That kind of segregation can be problematic. Great.
Okay. Let's go to another one. It said, interesting conversation. Doctor said, I am tuning in from Kenya. I know of a man who speaks to himself and has political debates with himself. His family says he reads too much, and as a result, has had problems. Is this madness, and what can be done to solve his issue?
Okay. I would really like for us to not say madness. The person is experiencing possibly a psychotic episode. Now, for
Mm,
us, and I don't know this person, but based on the information that you're saying, I'm going to respond just based on that information. Perhaps if I had more information, I could say something more valid. Now,
right.
in our practice, people speak to themselves in what we call active hallucination. So you cannot see the other people they're interacting with, but they're having a full-blown conversation with the other person. And that's usually a hallucination of sorts, which is very common in psychotic disorders. So
Mm,
most likely, based on the information, it's more of a
right.
psychotic experience that the person is having.
Mm. Another one here says, is anxiety a part of mental health issues? I find myself panicking at every random times of the day, even if I think I have nothing to worry about.
Absolutely, that's very classic. And I think what
Mm,
he's talking about is what we call panic attacks. So panic attacks are
mm,
these episodes where someone feels an intense feel of fear. Sometimes
right.
they have palpitations. They're unable to breathe. They feel like they're choking, and at the end of the day, they feel that they're about to die. Now, panic attacks
Mm,
typically would come from unresolved emotional related issues or even stresses that have accumulated so much that are overwhelming. So what it does is it puts the body survival system in high
mm,
alert, so much so that little things can trigger you to feel an intense experience of fear that may
right.
make your mind feel that you're going to die. Thankfully, all
Right.
these are things that can be managed. And if you see a
Right.
professional, they'd give you the best solution. Thank you.
Mm, mm. Grace Boating, FIFA, thank you very much for joining us. He said, thank you very much, Dr. Asafo. Please, I have a question. How can I support a friend or family member who seems to be struggling emotionally?
Well, if it's just emotional and it hasn't gone into the realms of mental illness, I think the best thing you can do is to have them download that emotional pain on you, is to tell you what is going on.
Right.
And you should be in a place where you can absorb it. We do know that people experience what we call vicarious trauma. So I could tell you of something gory that happened to me, and you may start
Mm,
reacting to it. So if you
mm,
feel like you have the wavelength to accommodate it, is to ask the person to express as much as possible. If you don't have
mm,
that wavelength, you can tell them to also journal what they feel, their pains, or you can guide them to get to speak to a professional to say, I've read about this. I was in this amazing webinar that said when people are going through emotional related issues, one of the best
yeah.
solutions is for them to speak about it. And so
Mm,
I think you should find someone that you can speak to. Thankfully, the modern world, information is all over. And if you go on social media, you can find online resources of people you can contact to have, sessions with, etc. So I think those are
mm.
the things that will be most helpful in the interim.
Okay. Allow your friend download their problems or whatever they're feeling on you, says Doc. Interesting technological usage of word right there. Here says, wow, I'm learning a lot. Thank you, Dr. Seth. It's quite sad that as Africans, we do not appreciate our mental health enough. Doc, on the cue of this particular comment from this participant, is our culture, our traditional culture, do you see any support from that space in terms of managing, creating awareness, and helping? Because clearly, you as a professional in that space, you're doing your best possible, and your colleagues in other in similar spaces as well. What can you say with respect to our cultural setting? Because that is one area that such conversations are for the gods.
Well, I mean, I think our culture has a number of positives as well as negatives. For
Mm,
example, our culture is heavily premised on social support. So when you have a
right.
challenge, you lose a loved one, you're doing something, even
Mm,
when you have a child, you have a lot of social support around you, which is a protective factor when it comes to mental health. Now, at the
mm,
same time, is the hardiness trait or the lack of vulnerability. And of course, let me highlight that because this month is Men's Mental Health Month. Father's Day is just
right.
around the corner. And if you
Mm,
look at some of the sayings like, men don't cry,
yeah.
strong
Yeah.
men do not express pain, etc.,
Mm,
those would be things that would impact our mental health negatively. But
right.
sometimes I look at our cultural systems, and especially when it comes to grief, there is something
Mm-hmm.
that we do that's very helpful. Maybe we do not know it's mental health related, but it is. Now, when
Okay.
someone loses a loved one, you would normally visit them at home to offer support. Now, each
Mm,
time you go, they have to narrate what happened to that person. And between the first time they narrate it and the second and the third, because they are
mm,
expressing it, you start to find that the emotional turmoil that they were experiencing in the beginning starts to reduce. And all these are
right.
powerful. But I
Mm,
suppose that when you also look at the way they equalize mental health or mental illness to spiritually related stuff becomes
mm,
one major block where
yeah.
sometimes what it also seems is that when someone has a mental health challenge, we don't even want
Mm,
to get near the person because we're afraid that
yeah.
whatever spirit that be that has engulfed them is likely to find a new medium. So there are
Right.
pluses and minuses. And so I do commend the Drive to Inspire Africa so much for this because we're
Right.
creating an awareness that makes people realize
True.
mental health challenges have biological basis also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And talking about creating awareness, if you want to have to see this particular webinar, if you missed it or joined late, you can go onto our YouTube page, Drive to Inspire Africa, and you can watch the full episode right there. And of course, on our Facebook page, Drive to Inspire Africa, LinkedIn, Instagram, and yeah, that's where you can find the full video. Another message here says, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, Doctor. Please, if you always keep things to yourself and thinking all the time, but not knowing the exact things you're thinking about, and you like it when you're sad and always want to be alone, please, what can be done?
Please speak to a professional.
Right.
So there are chances that it's not a big deal,
Mm,
except the part where you say you're sad all the time. Now,
yeah.
it turns out that there are people who are very inward, and that's because
Mm,
little things give them excessive stimulation. It might just be more of a personality trait or a temperament related stuff from a
right.
biological perspective. And it
Mm,
helps to find someone you can speak to who can, delve into it and then be able to know whether it's problematic or not. But on the surface, I don't want to pathologize anything here.
mm, yeah. Right. Right. Another one says, I have a male friend who keeps saying I make them have anxiety when they are around me. What could be done? What could be the cause? And how do I help make their nervous system calm around me?
Well, if someone's saying that you make them anxious, it could mean so many things. Sometimes it's
Right.
just an expectation related thing.
Okay.
Sometimes it's that you're very volatile. Sometimes it's just that you have mood swings and the person is confused about you, or that they're overthinking when they're around you. And it could be so many different things. Without knowing the specific perspectives, it's very difficult to say anything. But what I think you can do is to ask the person, what do I do that makes you anxious? And once they can tell you that, we can solidly help, or you can even help yourself deal with it. Yeah, thank you. I
Thank you
think
very
you,
much.
yeah.
Thank you very, yeah, thank you very much for that possible solution as well. Doc, finally, mental health patients sometimes, well, I've seen this in movies, I haven't seen it physically, resort to taking pills every now and then. At what point in time do these pills become necessary to addressing or helping, manage the situation?
So the majority of medications that are prescribed in mental health we call psychoactive. So they act
Okay.
on the brain. Now, I want you to think about these medications as the same medications that people take for their lifestyle disorders, like diabetes, like
Okay.
hypertension, like lupus, etc. Now, they
Mm,
take medications that regulate specific functions on a daily basis. And
okay.
our medications seem to do the same thing by managing neurotransmitter levels to ensure
Mm,
that you can function in the best way. Now, the
mm,
decision to be on medication is usually dependent on professional evaluation. And I always tell
right.
people that even when you start taking psychoactive medication, you get better. Do not on your own accord get off the medication. If you want to get off the medication, you must speak to your professional in that order before you do so. So that's the way I answer this question. It's based on
Okay. All right.
professional assessment, yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Before I let Doc go, let me quickly announce this event that's going to be happening on the 27th of June this month, on a Saturday, at Kuna Pod Laboni, and it's about the presence factor. It says, speak with authority, lead with presence, own your narrative. And this is by the Built for More Institute. So, I mean, renowned speakers, facilitator Claudia Lumore, publisher, fashion CEO, and brand strategist, renowned broadcaster, MC, and communication trainer, Kafuide, who's also a facilitator, as well as Sandra Thompson, lawyer, corporate governance expert, who's also going to be facilitating this event. The presence factor. That is what I encourage all of our participants here. Of course, those that were not able to join us, take part or register to be part of this particular event. However, it comes at a fee for 1,500 Ghana cedis. And for enquiries, you can email them at info@drive-to-inspire-africa. Okay, that's you email us info@drive-to-inspire-africa.org, or you can contact +233 54040680 +233 54040680. That is the Presence Factor event happening at Akuna Port Laboni here in Accra on the 27th of June 2026. And the rate is 1,500 Ghana cedis. The time is 9 a.m. Thank you very much for that. Doc, finally, before I let you go, what is that one key thing, one key element, very important one that you want our participants across the globe who are with us now, who would be watching the video later? What is that one thing, important element that you want every one of us to take away? That, of
Mental
course,
health.
have a bit of all of these things connected to.
Mental health is not mental illness. That's the most important thing. And just as you have physical illness or physical health, mental health can be equated as the same thing. The power to enhance your mental health is in your hands. It's in making the best choices. It's in exercising. It's in taking rest. It's in enjoying hobbies. It's in connecting with people. It's avoiding drugs, alcohol, and excessive social media usage. And more importantly, believing in the power that you have and knowing that you're unique. So you're not comparing yourself to other people and wanting to live their filtered lives when your life might probably be even more fulfilling than theirs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. And for those online who would like to join us from the international front, you can contact the numbers. Again, I'm going to mention +233 540 40 6080. And again, you can email info@drivetoinspireafrica.org. As we conclude today's webinar, I would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Seth Mawusi Asafo, for the insightful inspiration presentation conversation. Of course, it was on a, you look at it and you listen to it is more on a lighter note, but these are quite interesting and grave matters that we really need to take very, very important, because as I said, Drive to Inspire Africa, we engage every now and then with the future generations of Africa, of global Africans. So obviously this matter, mental health and well-being, is one that we critically really need to look at. And because at the end of the day, if one is having a defect in that space, it means that tomorrow that leadership position that awaits you would not be occupied. So it is very much important and significant to us as a social mandate that we also look at that area and see how we can create awareness, tell our audiences where to go seek for professional help. And it's okay to speak to a friend who would listen to you and not judge you, and that's quite important. So again, go onto our YouTube page, drivetoinspireafrica.org, for the full video of the presentation that Doc presented. And you can follow us across our social media platforms, Drive to Inspire Africa on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, you can go onto our website, drivetoinspire.org, and you can have all of the information. That if you are a potential mentor or mentee and you'd like to join the bigger family, you are most welcome. Again, my name is Barry Musa. I've been your moderator, and it's quite an interesting session. So thank you very much, and God bless you. See you again, and don't forget, we are still here for you.